So, good morning, everybody. I welcome you all, and I request you to please keep yourself muted while I am delivering the lecture. In case I ask you any sort of question, then please feel free to answer the question. During that time, you can unmute yourself. So, from today, we will be starting with our first module, which is talking about the evolution of human resource management. Then, the nature and scope of human resource management. Let us get started with our first unit on human resource management. And as I had introduced myself in the previous lecture, my name is Dr. Rhytheema Dulloo, and I'll be taking this lecture, this subject of human resource management for you people. Moving ahead. Now, whenever we talk of any sort of organization, every organization is a combination of materials and resources. Now, when we talk about resources, basically the term resources in the case of human resource management refers to human resources. And materials refers to the raw material which is being used by the organization for the purpose of production, money which is being used to purchase the raw material, and machinery which is using which you are making some sort of production or you are producing something. So that is what is referred to by material which is being used in the organization. And the term resources is referred to by human resources, which means that using human resources, the organizations are making the use of knowledge of human resources. They are making the use of skills of the manpower or the workers in the organization. Their education, their training, and their ability is being utilized. So each and every organization is basically combination of these two things, which is material and human resources. Now, what is happening in the present scenario is most of the organizations are facing scarcity of talented resources. Now, often we keep hearing from people stating that there is unemployment that is going on. People are not finding suitable jobs because of unemployment. But the fact is, the problem is not of unemployment, but the problem is people are unemployable. There was a study which was being done by various researchers which said that in India specifically, there is shortage of talented people which are needed by the organizations. So the management graduates or the engineering graduates. So the management and engineering graduates which are getting out of management or engineering institutes, they do not have the right kind of skills, they do not have the right kind of knowledge which is required by the organizations to accept or to, what to say, to get these people hired in the organizations. So this is one of the basic challenge that most of the organizations are facing today, scarcity of talented resources. So what is required is that students who are getting out of all these engineering and management institutes need to improvise on their knowledge. They need to understand that only theoretical knowledge which is being provided in the organizations is not enough. So what is being required is also practical knowledge. And how do you people get this practical knowledge? By going into internships. Okay, so when you go to the companies whereby you are working as interns or apprentices, you are gaining the practical knowledge, and by through this practical knowledge you are learning new skills. You are being trained that how the work has to be performed in the organizations, and that is what is being required by the companies which are ready to hire you or to give you placements in their organizations. Now, having understood this, now let us see what all topics are we going to cover in our first module. The first topic that we will be covering is evolution of human resource management, then the definition of human resources, the definition given by different authors for human resource management. We will be studying about nature of human resource management, scope of human resource management, objectives of human resource management, various functions which are being performed by HR manager or under human resource management, what is the importance or significance of human resource management, and then we will be also doing a case study based on this. Moving ahead, let us start with evolution of HRM. So as you can see in this slide, from 18th century to the modern times, human resource management has been evolving. The concept of human resource management has evolved through various stages of industrial revolution, the movement of trade union, then social responsibility era, then scientific management era, behavioral sciences era, and finally human relations management era. So throughout these eras or different phases, different concepts related to human resource management were evolved. And as I was sharing with you people previously, earlier what was being said that there is something called personal management, whereby your human resources were basically treated as labors or they were treated as factors of production. But throughout the different phases of human resource management, now the personal management concept has been replaced by the concept of human resource management. Many of the organizations previously had a department totally dedicated to personnel, and it was called as personnel department. But in the present scenario, this has been replaced, and now the organizations have a department which is called human resources department rather than personnel department. Now, personnel were basically the employees or the workers who were working in the organization. Okay, and as I said earlier, they were treated as a material or as a factor of production. But human resources were not treated as factor of production. When we say human resource, we refer to them as an asset of the organization. All right. So this is the change which has led from 19th century to the present times. Now, let us have a look at each of these eras and what were the developments which have taken place in these eras or the changes which have taken place during these eras and what all concepts related to human resource management were framed in each of these phases. So, moving ahead, let us have a look first of all at the Industrial Revolution era. Let us see what happened in Industrial Revolution era. This was the era, as you can see in this picture, there are a lot of people who are working in one particular place and they're working on different sort of machineries. So what happened in Industrial Revolution era? This phase started way back in 18th century. So during 1850s, it had started in Western Europe and United States of America. There were a number of changes which were brought during the Industrial Revolution era. Now, prior to Industrial Revolution era, there was a system of cottage system. Okay, and what were people doing? They were basically working from their homes. There were no proper machineries available for people to do their work. They had simple sort of tools and manual production of the items was being done sitting at home. But during Industrial Revolution era, the change that came about was a common place of work called factory system was developed. So what happened? The place of work changed from home to a central working area where people could work under a single roof. And this common place of work was called factory. So all the people from far-flung areas came together to one place of work and started working there. And then the another change which took place during Industrial Revolution era was use of machinery. So there were machines which were being installed in the factories and people started working on these machines rather than doing manual production. Now, when people started working on these machines, there was mass production. And for mass production, what was required? Division of labor was done, whereby all the work was divided into smaller number of tasks, and each person who was specialized for doing this task would be performing the work. So the changes were number one, factory system was introduced. Number two, the use of machinery by the employees or by the workers who were working in this organization or in this factory. So there was migration from rural areas to urban areas. Now, due to the movement of people from rural areas to urban areas where the factories were set up, the problem of housing and social isolation took place, because people who had migrated from all these rural places had to look for a place where they could live, right? Where they could stay. And so this problem of housing took place. Many people, say 50 to 100 people, would be actually living in one big room, okay, and due to which they were very unhappy. The substandard, okay, the condition where they were living were substandardized. And there was also social isolation, because people who were living in urban areas were not ready to accept the people who came from rural areas. And then the region to which these people belonged, or the culture to which these people belonged, were completely different. And so this resulted in social isolation. Another problem that took place during industrial revolution era due to factory system was loss of direct contact with the owners. Now, as we talk about the present time, in the present time, what we have a hierarchy system in the organization, whereby you must have studied in your first semester that there are different levels of management. You have top level of management, you have middle level of management, you have lower level of management, and finally you have operational level, right? But during that time there was
Excuse me,
no.
ma'am. Your voice
Yes.
is breaking a lot. We're not able to hear you.
Okay, just wait a second.
Ma'am, actually it's clear, ma'am. I think it should be his network problem.
Okay, then maybe for what about others? Is my voice audible and clear to everyone?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay.
It's coming from his.
All right, then maybe the student who said that my voice is breaking, maybe there's an issue with your network connection. All right. So moving ahead, what I said, as in the present time, during those times, there was no level of proper management. All right. So there was no hierarchy system. There was employer and there were employees. And since the number of employees were huge, they did not know how to contact the employer or the owner of the factory, because they hardly came to the organization. So, due to this loss of direct contact between employees and employer, if employees had any sort of issues, they did not know whom they should go to and address these issues to. Other than that, as I said, that machineries were being used in the factory system, people had the habit of working on who had the habit of working manually did not know how to use this machinery. They were totally untrained, they were unskilled, so they had to be trained first of all how to make the use of the machinery. All right. Then, other than this, there were many other problems which were present during the Industrial Revolution era. Now, the problems which were there in the Industrial Revolution era, other than what I have just spoken about, were people were made to work for 9 to 11 hours a day. As far as adults were concerned, they were made to work for 9 to 11 hours in a day, which means 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at night. As far as children were concerned, there was also child exploitation. So, as far as children were concerned, children below the age of 18 years were made to work from 14 to 15 hours a day in the factories. Labor, okay, or these workers were treated as a commodity, that is factors of production, which can be bought and sold anytime by the owner. There was monotony, there was boredom among the people, because people or the workers during that time felt that they were doing similar kind of task every day. There was nothing new that they had to do, so there was boredom among them. And if one part of the industry failed, then all the employees would be unemployed, right? Because if one part of the factory had failed or one part of the machinery had failed, then the employees who were working on those machineries would become unemployed. Women were made to work even if they were pregnant. Okay, so there was a lot of unrest by the time the industrial revolution came to an end. People as in the workers were pretty much unhappy by the conditions that they were facing, and this condition that they were facing, one of the reasons they felt that there was no way to reach the owners. There was no way whereby these workers or the laborers could tell about their problems to the employers or to the owners of the factory. And the middlemen who were involved were totally exploiting the laborers. So during Industrial Revolution era, there were three systems of human resource management which came into development. So these three systems of human resource management were: number one, recruitment of workers. Now, in the factories, when these people are coming from far flung areas, how should we recruit them? Okay. How should we recruit them? How should we select them for the positions? Now, recruitment means making people aware about the vacancies in your organization and stimulating them or encouraging them to apply for jobs in your organization. So, this first system of HRM was developed during Industrial Revolution era, which is called recruitment and selection of workers. Number two, training for the workers, because the workers or the laborers were unskilled. They did not know how to use the machinery, so they needed to be trained. So training for workers, this another concept of human resource management, was also developed during your Industrial Revolution era. And finally, control of workers. Since the number of workers, as I said, were huge in number, how do you need to control? How the controlling of these workers should be done? What is being done by them? What work has to be allocated to whom? How to ensure that each and every worker is the in the organization is performing the task as has been allocated to him. All this was evolved during your Industrial Revolution era. So, having seen Industrial Revolution era, let us move on to the second phase whereby human resource management had evolved, which is your trade union movement era. Now, as I said, during the Industrial Revolution era, by the end of, in fact, I should say, by the end of Industrial Revolution era, there was a lot of chaos, there was a lot of unrest among the employees in the organization because of the exploitation that was happening. So, in order to avoid this exploitation, what did employees do? They formed groups, okay? They came together and made work associations, which means all of the employees started making groups, okay, at the place of work. They started to organize themselves at the place of work, came together and made a union. These unions were called trade unions, and each trade union had a union leader who would be representing the problems of the employees to the employer. So the basic objective of this trade union was to safeguard the interest of the workers and to find a solution to their problems. And since these trade unions were formed in an era whereby all the employees had come together, so it came to be called as trade union movement era. The basic philosophy of trade union movement era was unity is strength. Alone or individually, we cannot be doing anything. Okay, we cannot bring an end to the unrest of the employees individually. So, what should we do? We should be coming together, have a unity among ourselves, and fight for the problems and discuss these common problems like child labor, long hours of work, poor working conditions, and bring them forward in front of the employer and try to find a solution for them. Okay. So, through the collective support and through unity, these employees started letting the employer know about the grievances which these employees were facing. The weapons which were being used by the employees or by the workers during the trade union movement era were strikes, slow down, walkout, boycott, sabotage in order to get their demands accepted. Now, when I say strike, we have seen many of the examples of strikes, right? Often we see that, employees of BSNL have gone on strike in order to get their demands met from the government. What is strike? Strike is a, kind of a weapon whereby the employees stop working. What is slow down? Slow down is another kind of a weapon which is being used by employees in order to get their demands accepted. whereby rather than producing as much as they are required to produce, they produce less. For example, if you're asked to have 100 units of production on a day, what you will be producing is hardly 20 units or 30 units. That is what is slow down. And then next is boycott, whereby you are just boycotting your work. Okay, you refuse to go to the place of work, or walk out, whereby you move out of the organization and stop working. So all these were different weapons which were being used by the trade unions or the people or the workers who were part of the trade union in order to pressurize the management or the employer to accept the demands of the workers. So employers, through these measures which were taken by the employees, were forced to listen to the demands or listen to the voice of the employees, and they were also pressurized in order to accept the demands which were being put forward by the employees. Now, during the movement of trade union era, there were different systems of human resource management which were evolved. Number one, employee grievance handling system, which meant that there should be a manager in the organization who would be totally responsible to look after any sort of grievance and sort the grievance of the employees while at workplace. Okay, then second system that was evolved was acceptance of arbitration for resolving conflict. Now, since there was conflict often between employer and the employer related to the demands of the employees, so often, what would happen? There would not be a consensus which would be reached when employees kept a demand in front of the employer. Employer would refuse to accept the demands of the employees because employer felt that they were asking too much, and employees felt that they had the right to ask these demands or to get these demands sorted out from the employer. So often there was no consensus that could be reached, and the conflict would not be sorted out. So in order to resolve the conflict, what was decided was that there would be a third party that would be brought in, which would be resolving the conflict between the employer and employee. And this third party, which would be resolving the conflict, would neither have any interest with the employees, nor they would have any interest with the employer. So it would be a totally impartial kind of a person or a third party that would be resolving the conflict between employer and employee. And this third party would be called as an arbitrator, and this method was called method of arbitration. So this arbitration method to resolve the conflicts between the employer and employee also came up during the trade union movement era. And since the employees or the workers were going on strikes, boycotting, slowing down the work, so there were some punitive measures that often needed to be taken in order to correct the behavior of the workers. So to correct the behavior of the workers, some disciplinary practice should be employed. So the method of disciplinary practice was also introduced during trade union movement era in order to curb the wrong practices of the workers. Thereafter, another system that was evolved during this era was employee benefit program. Now, different kind of employee benefits should be provided, like pension scheme should be given. Okay, the appropriate pension should be given to the employees when they reach the age of superannuation. Then employee provident fund should be provided to the employees. All these benefit programs were also introduced during the era of trade union movement. Then adoption of rational wage structure. Now, until before trade union movement era, people were being paid far less than what they deserved, and for different kind of specializations that were being performed by people, there was no appropriate wage structure which was available. Everybody was paid, as per the choice of the management. So what was decided during trade union movement era, that there should be adoption of rational wage structure. Now, what is rational wage structure? It states that depending upon the grade or level of the person, or depending upon the grade or level of the job, depending upon the responsibility that a person is holding at workplace, his wage should be decided and it should be rational. It should not be unfair. So people belonging to same grade performing the similar kind of task should be paid equally, irrespective of whether they are male or female. All right. So all these developments took place during your trade union movement era related to your HRM system. Moving ahead, after trade union movement era came the concept of or came the phase of social responsibility era. Now, what happened during social responsibility era? As we had seen, till now, employers were treating employees very harshly or brutally. They were treating them as factors of production, okay, which can be brought, which can be bought, which can be sold. But during social responsibility era, businesses, or I should say employers, started to feel that they have a responsibility towards the employees or the workers. They have a responsibility towards the consumers or the customers who are perhaps purchasing their products. They have a responsibility towards the government. They have a responsibility towards environment. They have a responsibility towards community and towards general public at large. So in the social responsibility era, there was adoption of humanistic and paternalistic approach. Now, what do we mean by humanistic and paternalistic approach? Now, this approach stated that workers or the employees working in the organization should be treated by the employers or owners of the organization just as fathers treat their children. So, you should be treating your employees as your own child. So, the person who advocated this philosophy was called Robert Owen. He adopted this philosophy at his own cotton mill, which he had at Scotland. So, what all did he do? He shortened the work timings from 12 to 10 hours a day. He raised the minimum age of employment for children to 10 years and provided toilet in the working areas. These were some of the improvements that he tried to make for the people and advocated that people working in the organization should be treated just as parents treat their child. So the practice which led to the development of HRM during this era was social welfare aspect of HRM. Now, what do you understand by when we talk about human resource management? There is also a concept or an aspect which is called social welfare. Now, what do you mean by social welfare? As the name says, we have to take care of the welfare of our society. Now, how do you take care of the welfare, okay, of the society? Here we are talking about statutory welfare and non-statutory welfare. So all the people who are related to our organization should be provided certain statutory welfare benefits and non-statutory welfare benefit. Now, statutory means something which is compulsory, which has been stated by the law, okay, or which is stated by the government. Okay, now these are the obligations which each and every organization or with which each and every company which is running, uh, which is having employees should be fulfilling. Now, these statutory welfare benefits are: you have to provide drinking water facility to in your premises or in your organization for all the employees. There should be appropriate facility for sitting for the employees in the organization. That is, there should be proper rest place where people can sit and take rest if they are tired of working. First aid appliances should be made available in each and every organization. Proper toilets, proper latrine urinals should be provided in the organization for both men and women. Proper canteen facilities should be provided in each and every premises of the organization. Proper spittoons should be provided. The lighting, okay, should be provided, okay, appropriate as in proper lighting should be provided in the organization or in the workplace. There should be appropriate washing places like bathrooms, wash basins, taps being provided in the vicinity of the workplace. Changing rooms, restrooms should be provided whereby There should be appropriate lockers, okay? There should be appropriate, adequate lockers for people to keep their clothes and belongings should be provided in the premises of the organization. Maternity and adoption leave should also be given to the employees in the organization. Now, all these are your welfare benefits which are being provided to the employees in the organization, and these are mandatory, which have been given by the law, okay, and you cannot be making any changes to it. So these are called as statutory welfare benefits. Now this concept was also introduced during your social responsibility era. And then non-statutory benefits, these are the benefits which are not stated by the law. It is not compulsory for you to adopt them, but as an owner of the organization or as an employer, this is your responsibility towards your people. But even if you do not provide them to your employees, then law is not going to hold you responsible for it. Now, under non-statutory benefits, there are different kind of benefits that an employer could provide to the employees. But some of the benefits I have just jotted down here, which were introduced during your social responsibility era. Personal health care, taking care of the health of personal health of all the employees in the organization by ensuring health checkup for your employees in the companies. Flexi time, that is many of the people, or many of the workers working in the organization may have their some, what to say, family obligations, due to which they should be provided flexible timings, different shifts during the day. There could be morning shift, there could be afternoon shift, there could be evening shift, there could be night shift. So depending upon the flexibility or the work schedule which an employee wishes to adopt, they should be provided an option of flexible timing in the organization. Employee assistance program, whereby employees could be given the counseling to choose the right kind of career and how to balance between their professional and personal life. All these kind of systems were developed during your social responsibility era related to non-statutory benefit. And there was also a system which was called employee referral scheme. Now what was happening in employee referral scheme, which is even nowadays adopted by top notch companies like H&L, okay, then companies like Apple, all of them are, what are they doing? They are adopting this employee referral scheme, whereby companies are asking their employees to refer any person, their friend or relative, for employment in the organization. And in exchange, these people or these employees who are already working in the organization and suggesting the name of the person who could be employed in their own organization, these employees are given some sort of remuneration for recommendation or for referring. Okay, so this is called employee referral scheme. So these were different kind of non-statutory benefits which were developed during your social responsibility era. Now, just to give you okay, so what is being said here, Economic Times report said companies like Adidas, Reebok, Nike, Puma were sourcing or were getting raw material from the companies whose workers suffered 7 working days a week, 16 to 18 working hours a day, sexual harassment of women, and their workers were forced to do overtime without payment for overtime. Now, what is being said here? Although the different statutory and non-statutory welfare benefits were introduced during the social responsibility era, but even today in present times, the employers are actually treating their employees as factors of production, and the exploitation of workers is still happening, even though different concepts have been evolved in order to protect this or in order to eradicate all these problems which were being faced by the workers in the industrial revolution era. But still, many of the companies are exploiting their labor to the best possible way that they can. All right. So moving ahead, after social responsibility era came the phase of scientific management era. Now, what happened in scientific management era? How many of you know who is the father of scientific management? Can anybody tell me who is the father of scientific management? You can just unmute yourself and just tell me who is father of scientific management. Who is father of scientific management? All of you are students of management, right?
I'm Frederick Winslow.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So, Frederick Winslow Taylor, please remember, you are students of management. These things should be on your tips, all right? Father of scientific management was Frederick Winslow Taylor. Now, what did he say? Said that there should be one best way of doing the job. Okay. So during scientific management era, basically what happened, the principle, there were certain principles which were given by by Taylor during scientific management era. Some of the principles which were given were replacing rule of thumb with science, cooperation between management and workers, maximum output rather than restricted output, harmony rather than discord. So what was happening? This person called Taylor, he was working in a steel company in Pennsylvania. So what did he do? He observed how the workers are working in the steel company. There were certain studies which were done during the scientific management era. One of the study that was done was called time motion studies, whereby the timing that was being taken to complete a task and the movements which were being made by the people to complete a task were being observed for different employees. And finally, the best movement which resulted in completing the task in the shortest possible time was considered to be the best way of doing the job. So, what did Taylor advocate? That by observing people doing a job, you should be trying to find out one best way of doing the job, and that should be implemented by each and everybody in the organization, which would result in increase in productivity of all the employees in the organization. And he advocated that a rule of thumb should be replaced with science. Now, what does rule of thumb means? Rule of thumb means, like, if I give you an example, for example, what example should I give? Okay, if I give you an example, today, say one of the workers has taken a leave, and when he has taken a leave, he did not inform his superior that he is going to take an off today. So what happens when his salary comes? His 1 day's salary is being deducted because he had taken leave without informing his supervisor. Then another employee in the same organization takes a leave without informing the supervisor, but for him, the salary is not being deducted. Now, what is happening here? There are there is similar situation for two different employees. Same sort of thing has happened. Both of them have taken a leave on a different day, but or they have absented themselves on a different day, but they did not inform the supervisor or the manager. However, for one person, the salary has been granted. For the other person, for 1 day's salary has not been granted. This is called whereby you are at different situations doing different kind of thing. There is no proper system which is being followed. There's no proper rule which is being followed, and this is what was being advocated by Taylor, that it should be replaced by science, whereby you should advocate some scientific methods, or you should advocate some policies and rules which should be uniform for each and every employee working in the organization. So not just depending upon your gut feeling or your intuition, you decide that what decision should be taken in what sort of situation. In each and every situation, there should be a proper scientific method which should be used in order to reach a solution. All right. And he also advocated there should be proper cooperation between both the management and workers. The conflict should be reduced as far as possible. maximum output should be reached rather than restricted output. Now, what was happening actually in most of the organizations, people were being paid depending upon the number of days that they were, okay? So people were given the salary depending upon the number of days that they worked, irrespective of number of units that they produced. So what would people do if they were supposed to produce 100 units? Then each day they would be producing 5 units so that they could work for more number of days and complete the task of producing 100 units. In case they produce 10 units in a day, then they would be paid only for 10 days because the target of 100 units of production would be completed in 10 days. But if they reduced their output and they produced a restricted output whereby they produced only 5 units on a day, then their salary which would be given would be for 20 days rather than 10 days. So this was one of the problem that was being found by Taylor while he was working in the steel plant at Pennsylvania, that people were restricting their output rather than having a maximum output. So it was advocated by him that people working in the organizations should go for maximum output, and to ensure maximum output or productivity from the employees, piece rate system should be adopted. What was piece rate system? It said that people should be paid depending upon how many number of units they are producing in a day. It is not based on the number of days they are working. All right. So another principle that was being advocated by him was harmony rather than discord. So there should be harmony among all the workers working in the organization, and there should not be any place for friction among them. And during the scientific management era, the concept of HRM, which was evolved, was called human engineering. Now, what is human engineering? It means study of people at work and study of work methods which are being used by the people in the workplace, which is called human engineering. All right. Moving ahead, after scientific management era, the next era during which HRM concept was evolved was called behavioral sciences era. Now, as the name says, during this phase, what was happening? The behavior of people at workplace was being studied. Okay, so different authors related like Elton Mayo, okay, then Mintzberg. What did they all were behavioral scientists. What did they do? They also contributed to the behavioral sciences era, whereby they studied the behavior of people at work, that why do people behave the way they do. I'm sure you must have studied about the experiments which were done by Elton Mayo. Okay, different sort of lighting experiments which were done by him. So what did he conclude? All these behavioral scientists, by observing the employees in the organization or in the companies, contributed or concluded that individual behavior is linked with group behavior. When people are working in an organization or in a factory, they are not working as individuals. Their behavior is linked with group behavior. If in a group there are 5 people who are working, and if one of them is weaker as compared to other 4, then the other 4 are going to share the work of the 5th one, and they are going to contribute maximum to the group. So individual behavior is linked with your group behavior. People working in the organizations do not dislike work. In fact, job itself is a source of motivation and satisfaction to employees, was also concluded during behavioral sciences era. If you remember, you must have studied in your organizational behavior about Maslow's need hierarchy theory, then McGregor's theory X and theory Y. They were all scientists of your behavioral era, which had spoken that there were 2 categories of people who disliked work and who liked work. Okay, so here, the contribution that was being made by the behavioral scientists said that individual behavior is linked with your group behavior. So, if you know that your entire group is working and the reward has to be given then to each and every individual, then what would happen? Individual behavior will be linked with your group behavior. People do not dislike work. In fact, they find it as a source of motivation and satisfaction for the employees. Managers should be creating a conducive, healthy environment whereby all the subordinates can contribute to the best of their capacity. Now, the different kind of concepts of HRM which were evolved during behavioral sciences era were two-way communication. Okay, it was being said that there should be two-way communication whereby the employees should also be heard. It is not that only managers are giving instructions to the employees. Okay, so employees also should have a say in the management. There should be participation of employees in decision making, and the concept of development, management development, was also evolved during behavioral sciences era. And finally, the final stage, okay, of your whereby your concept of HRM was evolved was human relations management era. During human relations management, Peter F. Drucker is considered to be the main inventor of your HRM concept, that is your human relations management concept. During this era, it was stated that people should be treated as resources rather than factors of production. That is, they should be treated as an asset of an organization. They should not be treated merely as physiological being, but they should be treated as socio-psychological being. Socio-psychological being means that people who have certain emotions, socio and psychology. What is socio? Socio means people who belong to a culture, people who belong to a religion, people who require job security, and psychological. Psychological means people who have emotions, who have feelings. So people should not be merely treated as a body, okay, as a physical body who can be bought and sold, but they should be treated as somebody who has emotions, who has feelings, who has needs, who has a family, which should be taken care by the organization. And during this time, what happened? There was a change that took place, and the concept of personal management was converted to human resources management, and the department from personal management was changed to the Department of Human Resources department in each and every organization. And at the academic level, also, the same change took place, whereby rather than saying personal management, most of the institutes started adopting and practicing and teaching human resources management rather than teaching personal management. So this was the evolution which has taken place, okay, for human resource management, and how different concepts during different phases of or different phases took place for human resource management. So I stop here. With this, we have completed our topic of evolution of HRM, and in the next class we will be starting with what is HR, what is HRM. We will be studying about their definition, nature, and scope.